let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Water Cooler Chat, where we talk about all things Livepeer, whether it's orchestrating, delegating, broadcasting, transcoding, or anything to do with Livepeer. We're here to ask questions and get answers. Today we do have an agenda ahead of us. We have Thul, who is going to be our guest today for a Q&A session. Thul is, I guess you would call yourself. I'll let you introduce yourself. I don't need to do for you, but we'll start with introductions, and then we'll head straight into the Q&A session. If you are in the chat here, I did post a link to the write-up for what Thul had published, but if you don't feel like reading it all, then obviously, well, in the next 30 seconds, then that's okay. We're going to go through it together, and we'll be able to go through lots of topics and talk about them. So. I'm Titan, been running the Titan Node Orchestrator since April 2021, and I have no topics today, just ready for the Q&A session. Pon, would you like to introduce yourself and a topic?
Hi everyone, I'm Pon. I've been running my own orchestrator for just over a year now. I have no topic, so I'm just listening in. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you for joining us. Frank, would you like to introduce yourself and a topic?
Yeah, good evening. I'm Frank. I'm running Ultima Ratio node since 2 years now, and I have no topics, just listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us, Frank. Papa Bear, would you like to introduce yourself and a topic?
I am Papa Bear. I run the Solar Farm Orchestrator. I've been doing that since July of 2021, and I am excited to hear from Thul. Missed him, and also curious to hear more from Dob about the proposal that he posted, which was a lot to take in. So I'd like to hear some more from that before I comment on it in the forums. And no specific topic, just want to hear what's going on.
Very good. Thank you for joining us, Papa Bear. Ben, would you like to introduce yourself and a topic?
Hey everyone, sorry if there's background noise. Currently touching grass at the moment. But I'm Ben. I run Authority Null. Been doing it for about 1.5 years now. I'm also on the team building out Video Miner. No topic for me today.
Very good. Thank you so much for joining us. Varies, would you like to introduce yourself and a topic?
Hey, I'm running the version Ameris.eth orchestrator since 4 years now, and no specific topic from my side.
Very good. Thank you for joining us. Thul, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hail, I'm Salima, aka Yavon, the lead developer behind Mist Surfer, which is the technologies that at least Livepeer Studio is built on, and hopefully more of Livepeer soon. And that's what I'm here to talk about to some degree.
Very cool. And yeah, well, after we do introductions, we'll jump into the Q&A. Thank you for joining us, Thul, and great to have you. Doug, would you like to introduce yourself and a topic?
Yeah, sure thing. I'm Doug. I'm one of the founders of Livepeer. Excited to hear about Yaren's proposal, but I'll be jumping on and off for the next 50 minutes until 4 p.m. when I'll drop back in to talk about the Livepeer Delta proposal around sustainable public goods funding, governance, treasury, and all that fun stuff. So hopefully there's a little time to talk at the end, but you can focus on this other proposal first.
Very good. I like it. Thank you for joining us, Doug. G2, would you like to introduce yourself and a topic?
Hey guys, I'm G2. I've been building on Livepeer for a few months, and topic wise, I don't think no, I don't. I'm kind of getting. I'm still polling because we're trying to add like a DAO structure to our project. But no real questions around it specifically. So
no worries. Thank you so much for joining us, G2. Great to see you again. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into the Q&A session. So, Thul, you put out this post that you gave to me 5 minutes ago, so I do appreciate the timely heads up. Since I haven't
almost 15 now.
Since I haven't had much time to read it, do you want to give us the abstract around what you've written and what your thoughts are, and just get us started?
Yeah. So the quick summary is that over the last years, months, working very technically with Livepeer and Livepeer Studio in general, I noticed a few things that, from the perspective of a streaming engineer, as I am, are not quite perfect. Let's call them that. And I basically wrote up a list of problems that I noticed and how I think we can resolve these relatively simply. And that is what the whole text is about, basically trying to make everything better for everyone.
Definitely. Yeah, so you've clearly put a lot of thought into this, and I do appreciate the thorough write up. So we'll definitely go into that right now. So I believe one of the first topics in your write up was about the workflow of how right now streams are sent in segments from the B to the O to the T to the O to the B. Could you tell us a little bit about what problem you're seeing, how big of a problem this is, and then afterwards you can jump into maybe a solution you might have.
Yeah, well, actually, all of it is about this one thing, more or less. That workflow is a problem in and of itself, which has multiple sub-problems. And I would say the biggest one is probably that this means that all the streams need to travel through all of these, sometimes twice, in most cases twice. And that's a lot of bandwidth. And most of these nodes don't actually need the contents of the stream. They just need to know about the stream. They need to know, what kind of data is going back and forth. They don't need the data itself. For example, the orchestrator and the broadcaster specifically. They need to, keep track of things. They don't need the data. And if we don't actually send the data there anymore, well, that's a lot of bandwidth that no longer needs to run through those nodes. So they could be running, on much lower power computers compared to right now, with much worse internet connections compared to right now. Well, the transcoder needs to keep, a good connection and good processing power, as is expected.
Great. So, obviously there's lots of extra hops involved with sending back the data, but right now the Livepeer network seems to operate quite well. If you watch a stream, you don't have many missing segments, and it's it has a delay, but overall it seems quite healthy. Do you believe that this is pretty critical to change, and what are the benefits of eliminating the B and the O?
Well, we're not eliminating them, right? We're changing their role slightly by removing media processing from it. They keep doing what they're doing, just remove the media. But yeah, the key reason we need to be doing this, and as far as I'm concerned, as soon as possible, is because, well, the current setup works under light load, which is what we've had so far, right? It's been, a decent amount of load, but I don't think anyone is going like, gee, I'm swamped with work right now. And that's fine, as we're still building. But as the load will increase, and I expect this to happen within the next few years, probably very quickly when it starts happening, the network will start straining under some of these decisions that were made in the past because, no one was thinking in this direction. And that is where we're going to start running into problems. So if the load goes to like 2 or 3 times what it is today, we will probably start seeing some things start to fall apart. And I would like to prevent that before we see it.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. One of the reasons for the B and the O being present is a security function where, we can verify, that the content is coming from, who they say it is, and we can do verification on that, whether it's TrueBit or any of these things that have been implemented. What security trade-offs would we be, you know, um, subject to if we got rid of the B and the O receiving the media data?
Yeah, the tricky part here is that if you want to keep all the security intact, which we can do, I think, that means that instead of having the actual data itself, they only deal with hashes. And I mean, they already make hashes of the data as is anyway, because it's not like you can store the full stream on chain. That makes no sense, right? Or even communicate about the full stream. So they already work with hashes of the stream. And right now, these are made of the segments. And what we would have to do is, instead of these hashes being calculated by the broadcaster and the orchestrator, they would be calculated by the transcoder and the person requesting the transcode. So all the way in the other end of the chain, so to speak. Now, if both of these calculate and transmit a hash, both of the input and the output, to the orchestrators and the broadcasters, and both of them agree on what the hash is, then there is no problem, because that means that they all agree on what data was exchanged, and everything can continue as is, and we can keep our assurances as is. But if they disagree on what the hashes are, then that means that probably both the orchestrator and the broadcaster would say, okay, hang on, there's a disagreement here. Let's stop this transcode and reestablish it from the start, or reestablish it elsewhere.
And so you're saying that the person who is sending the stream into the network, say I'm streaming this directly on my laptop, my laptop is producing the hash that would go with the stream.
Well, that's a little bit of the tricky part indeed, because usually the person that is actually doing the broadcast, so where the camera is, so to speak, or where the recording is happening, you know, the original recording, that's usually not the point that actually talks to the broadcaster. Because, like, let's say right now you're streaming to Livepeer Studio, for example, and I'm naming this one as the example most places because, you know, it's the biggest implementation and the only one that I'm familiar with. But what you're doing is you're not streaming directly to a broadcaster. You're streaming to a node that is being run by Livepeer Inc. that is then itself talking to a broadcaster. And that first node that you're streaming to, that will be doing the hash calculations. So the end user would not notice any difference.
Right. But how does the beginning user do the hash calculation? Because it's not typical with sending streams right now.
Yeah, so they wouldn't. What happens is the end user sends data into a node. That node calculates the hashes, sends the request to the broadcaster, figures out a transcoder to talk to. Transcoder also calculates hashes. Those two nodes find out, you know, all the details, and then the stream continues on its merry way. So the person sending it in would not need to calculate any hashes just like now. Though, of course, we could in the future do fun extensions where that does happen on that side. And then you can get interesting guarantees about where the data is coming from. But that's not in scope for the current one. That's more of a future stuff thing.
Wait, but doesn't that mean the broadcaster still is active then? Because they're taking the media and then forwarding it on?
No, the broadcaster is the step after where the media is taken. So right now, when you stream into Livepeer Studio, what happens is it goes to a media server node hosted by Livepeer Inc. That takes stream and forwards it to a broadcaster that is ran by also Livepeer Inc. So there's already a second hop happening there that is kind of invisible to everyone.
Right.
And
So that would be what we
that is where
consider the ingest node, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like
The ingest node,
right,
so to
yeah.
speak. That is the one requesting the transcode in this case.
Right. So, but the media server is the one receiving the stream to begin with, and then from there it's being sent to an orchestrator, right? Or at least through a broadcaster, then the orchestrator.
Currently, yes.
But
And
aren't the media servers kind of doubled up on top of the media? Are the broadcasters not already doubled up on the media server? So like, there's really no lag there. Like that hop seems
there's no network latency, that's right. But there is still an extra copy of the data happening, right? The data is received by one program, then copied, sent to another program, and that extra copy is also introducing extra work, extra memory requirements, etc.
Right. So you still need an ingest server to accept this data.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there we can send it to a transcoder, and then from that transcoder, where does it go?
Usually back to that ingest server, and then we consider the stream completed with its transcodes. So you have the original, maybe 2 or 3 transcodes, and that whole set of all the qualities is then sent on to wherever the stream is supposed to be going, say a CDN.
Right. So if someone was running an O/T, it would be a very similar workflow to that right now, then, wouldn't it? Like,
Yeah, effectively there would be no change for them.
Right. Okay. So you're focusing more on eliminating the O hop then in that case.
Yeah, and if the O and the T are running on the same machine, I mean, you're already optimizing a little bit here because you're not sending from one instance of the software to another instance of software, right? You're going straight to the one doing the work and skipping that extra copy inside the machine. But indeed, there's no extra network hop there.
Right. Okay, well let's pause there for a sec. Do we have anyone that have any questions about this so far, or want to make any comments?
A quick question, just roughly, like, I mean, I don't even know how to like quantify this, but how compute intense is the hash that needs to be created for verification?
Well, the fun thing is that CPUs have been optimizing for things like hashes for ages, and this is these days on a modern processor practically a free operation. It's not entirely free, but it's pretty close.
That was my guess. I just wanted to confirm that it wasn't taking
Yeah.
a bunch of resources. Okay. So it
The
wouldn't be a
idea
big deal
is
for the
that
it wouldn't be a big deal for the transcoder to handle it, because I mean, I guess right now, if you're running, like you said, an OT combined, it's already being handled on the same machine and doesn't seem to affect performance.
yeah, exactly. And the idea is that the places that verify these hashes would do only very little work, like the orchestrator and the broadcaster in this case. And you could theoretically run these on like small mini computers. Well, you know, the big bulky ones are the actual transcoders.
Right, right. Seems like a great idea to me, because I've always thought that there was a lot of extra uh, hops involved that just like for all the reasons you've stated earlier, just don't seem necessary, or seem to just add complexity uh, and lag to the network.
So, in its current form, do we? You mentioned that we could definitely start seeing this bottleneck, or at least being cumbersome in the future. By eliminating the B and the O, are we really fixing the problem, or are we still have a problem with distributed networks around the world with um, with varying degrees of reliability and bandwidth and all these kinds of things?
I mean, that's always the case when communicating over the internet, right? But the cool thing is, because we're no longer um, funneling that all through a small set of nodes, as you know, there's a limit of 100 active orchestrators on time right now. I mean, sure, that limit could be increased, but the fact that there's a limit at all means that there's 100 must pass through its node. And allowing multiple transcoders to connect to them, you are theoretically opening that up to a potential of infinite any stream would have to pass through, rather than just 100.
Right, because you're allowing multiple T's under each orchestrator kind of thing. That's what you're saying. So you cut out there a
Exactly.
little bit for me, and just want to confirm that. Great.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Well, and how long do you think it would take to implement such a task? Is this a big undertaking, or a relatively small one, with a few tweaks? Like what degree of changes do you think would have to happen?
So what's probably going to happen is in the next 2 or 3 weeks-ish, I'm going to sit with some other people from Livepeer and figure out what can we do without making drastic changes to everything, right? How much can we actually do off of everything that I'm trying to propose
Very
without
good.
it becoming a problem? Once we've determined that, the hope is that still within, say, this month or so, we hope to get at least a proof of concept of some of these changes rolled out, and then if everything works well, hopefully quickly move on. But the actual pace is, as with all development a little bit up in the
Definitely. In your write up here, you also mentioned you talked about segment based workflows. Do you see Livepeer going in a different path? Other than, I don't know what other options there are other than segment based. Because real, at least close to real time or really low latency streaming is kind of the norm now. If you go to YouTube or Twitch, there's not big delays like there used to be. What would we have to do to the workflow to or compete on that level?
That's actually the other half of my proposal, more or less. So one half is cutting out the nodes that don't need to do the media stuff. The other half is instead of using a segmented workflow, switching to a fully streaming workflow where media is continuously flowing in both directions.
How does a continuous streaming workflow work?
A to B, right? But the difference is that instead of having a clear starting and ending point in the form of a segment beginning and end, there's just a continuous flow of data. And in order for the payment system and the guarantees and all that to work, we will still need to do segmenting on the receiving side and the sending side. This is like a type of virtual segmenting. You're pretending there are segments, when in reality it's just one continuous stream, and you're just chopping up predetermined points where you go like, okay, and we're going to pretend this was one segment and this was one segment. But you decide that after receiving it, well, you continuously process.
Is that a norm that they do in OBS? Like, say, like I use OBS and I choose my segmenting at 2-second intervals. Is that a setting I would have to change in OBS to say, hey, I just want to send my data continuously? Is that a standard?
OBS only sends continuously. There is no segmented transmission mode in OBS.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you decide the keyframe interval, which is where you could potentially segment, and that is where indeed the current system segments. It basically restricts the segmenting to those points. But the actual data stream sent by OBS is always a continuous stream.
Okay, so we're not talking about keyframe intervals then. We're talking about actual segmenting then.
Yeah, like consider them files that each together form the whole stream. But in a fully streaming workflow, you have one big file that just keeps growing.
Right, so there isn't any upgrades we need to do in the standard of how streams are sent to media servers to begin with. They're already continuously streamed. It's just the keyframe interval that OBS has a setting. The media server then chops them up into segments once it's received. Is that what you're saying?
Except we stopped doing that. That's what we're doing now. So right now, the stream comes in continuously to the media server, which then chops it up. And those chopped up parts are transmitted one at a time. And what we are going to, if my proposal goes through, that is going to be doing is to stop chopping them up. We pretend we are chopping them up, but we actually stream them all the way to the transcoder.
Does the
That make sense?
transcoder chop them up? Or do they ever get
No,
chopped up?
chopping up actually happens nowhere.
Mm.
They just continuously get transformed, so to speak.
So the stream would essentially just flow directly through to the transcoder. Would the transcoder have to have a port open in order to open a connection with the media server, or
That's a good question. Yes and no. This depends to some degree in how we decide that media transport happens. And there's a few options we can pick, and that's one of the open questions right now. Is exactly how will we make that happen? And one of the options is that we go with like an RTP type workflow, which is similar to WebRTC and RTSP. And that would allow stun and turn negotiation where any potential fireworks or NAT is bypassed.
right?
But ideally, we can indeed make a direct connection.
Because that seems to be a pretty big bottleneck, or at least hurdle for people that want to come in and use Livepeer, or at least contribute their resources to Livepeer. They're often behind, home routers, firewalls. They're not in these commercial places where they have, ports open to the public for security reasons. So, one reason the orchestrator and transcoder separate worked so well is because the orchestrator can be run on a VPS where it can open ports and listen and be very connective. But people that wanted to transcode, they're behind their firewalls still, and they're able still to connect to the orchestrator. But you believe that that connection can be, that level of ease can be maintained if we just go from the media server directly to a transcoder.
Yeah, think of this the same way that, for example, this call we're having right now. All directly like this, right? There'd be way more delay if we were not directly connected. Yet we're all behind firewalls, at least most of us at least are, I think. But everything's working. That's because this is an RTP connection. We're actually talking over WebRTC right now. Discord doesn't tell you this, but Discord chat is implemented as WebRTC. And what happens is there are RTP packets, which is an age-old standard, traveling over the network over plain UDP, and there are techniques like UDP hole punching and turn servers that take care of making sure you bypass the firewalls and the NAT setups and allow direct connections as much as possible. And we can leverage those exact same existing frameworks and those existing network methods to do this. The cool thing is because Zoom, Hangouts, Discord, etc. are all super popular recently, especially since COVID a couple of years back, right? There's no internet provider in the world anymore that blocks these things. And we can totally benefit from that as well by leveraging the same technologies.
Very good. I like it. That's very good to know, and I'm glad.
Makes sense too, right?
Yeah. Well, let's pause there again. Does anyone else have any questions about the technology or the technical aspect of this?
It's eerily silent, which
Yeah.
means that either I explained it perfectly or everyone's so confused that they don't dare speak anymore.
No, I think you did a good job of explaining it, and I'm ready for it to. I'm ready to see the next step. Let's go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too.
I think it's just I actually think you've explained it very well, and so there's not much confusion around it. I think you've done a good job. The next topic I want to talk about is security and slashing. So right now we have this model where because the media runs through the broadcaster and the orchestrator, and because we can create hashes on it, we have this idea of security through slashing, and we could slash a dishonest transcoder. If the broadcaster and the orchestrator are not going to be touching the media, and but then how do you propose we deal with slashing or verifying? I guess because the media server creates the hash and the transcoder would create the hash, so we have the data. Would we continue going with slashing is not even enabled yet, but would we continue down that path? Do you find slashing important? What is your opinion on keeping the security of the network?
Well, rather than protocol-based slashing, which makes sense in theory, I think we can go for a much more practical concept where if you don't like the transcode that's happening, which you will now immediately be able to see because it's all continuously ongoing, right? You don't have to wait for a full segment to finish or anything like that. You can right away see, oh, I'm not happy with this transcode here. You can just switch to a different provider, different transcoder, different orchestrator, whatever. So you get the most effective slashing of all, which is you stop sending work there.
Right. Okay. So, do you believe you believe that even this upgrade of changing the workflow from a segment-based system to a fully streamed system will actually increase security because you're more likely to catch a dishonest transcoder sooner and then switch to a different transcoder?
Yeah, you'll be able to detect this immediately, right after the first few frames, rather than having to wait for a full transcode and potentially delaying your stream.
Oh,
So just a few frames in, you can already be like, oh, I'm going to switch to someone else because I don't like this one.
right. Do you believe in that sense then slashing is necessary?
Well, I don't think the protocol level slashing is exactly necessary because if you stop sending work there, well, they're not getting paid anymore. And if they're not getting paid, then, well, they're not going to keep doing what they're doing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we've gotten this far in the network without slashing, and there hasn't seemed to be any issues, or even I've never heard of anyone sending back dishonest transcoded data. Um, I want to again pause. Does anyone else have any opinions on the slashing? I mean, will it get enabled? Will it ever get enabled? Or what are people's thoughts around slashing in general?
I mean, the switching would work for like quality issues, I guess. So like if no work at all would happen, but for example, what if you have like a malicious transcoder that purposely like wants to disturb like a huge public broadcaster or like a press conference of some sort and broadcast their own message or agenda, like a total different video, for example. I mean, then switching is probably not ideal. So for that, you want to have an economic security that if the transcoder was to do this, then there would be huge financial consequences for the transcoder. So you have this guarantee, right?
Still possible to have this, thankfully, because all you have to do is keep a copy of the stream, which I assume the person that wants the stream to be transcoded will, both of the transcoded and not transcoded.
Right. So
And since we already know that the hashes match and those are signed by the transcoder, you can verify.
So by switching over to this new workflow, we believe that we can continue down the roadmap of enabling slashing in the future, because you're still generating two hashes that you can compare, and then the saved file, which is the output from the transcoder, can be reviewed by the community, and a slash could happen then, basically. So
Yeah, and can be checked against the same hashes.
right. So the same the roadmap of slashing could still progress forward with this upgrade, is what you're saying.
Completely unchanged, theoretically, even.
There you go. Well, there you go. I like that. That's very nice.
So I personally may not believe that slashing is necessary, but if others do, nothing is stopping them from still continuing that path.
I like it. So we've covered quite a bit about the workflow of the BOTOB, and as well as the workflow of segmentation. Is there anything that we didn't cover before I move on to the next topic, which is going to be about AV1 and upgradability? Do you want to cover anything else that you wrote about, or any nuances or topics that you'd like to mention about your write-up, Thol?
Yeah, I think a nice nuance that we didn't really cover, that I didn't cover well either, is that by allowing transcoders to directly communicate, we are making it a good idea to diversify where the transcoders are running and potentially run them in your home and stuff like that, rather than putting them in a data center near where the broadcasters are. And that can be really interesting for the areas where there are no broadcasters or orchestrators nearby, but there are people wanting to stream and there are people wanting to transcode. And we can directly connect those together, which is currently effectively not happening / even possible. And I like the idea that this will become possible by the changes.
But
What? Oh, sorry, I
no,
didn't want
go
to
ahead.
talk
Go
over
ahead.
you, Titan. That was actually a question that I had was, would the orchestrator then would become really more of a router in a sense of getting the stream to the proper transcoder. Would it be possible to add more features in that allow maybe some more routing capabilities to the orchestrator to, like, if you've got multiple, can you attach multiple transcoders in different locations and it can make the decision which transcoder to send it to, getting rid of the need for using like GeoDNS through centralized service?
Yeah, that's kind of the idea, yeah. And in fact, I would even go a step further. Rather than allowing the orchestrator to do this routing, I like to think of orchestrators more of like agents for their transcoders, in the same way that like an agent for a music group would act. Like they give you a listing of these are all the people I represent. Pick any one of them that you like, and then the person that wants the transcode to get done, they can connect to any of these, start sending the work there, and if they don't like one of them, they can switch to another without needing to switch orchestrator. So this also means that multiple transcoders on one orchestrator and one not performing well will no longer affect the performance of the whole orchestrator, but just that one transcoder.
Yeah, that seems awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting to a point where we're getting close to having the Livepeer router running. I have it running on Livepeer Academy, and it's effectively doing that, right? It sends work to the nearest orchestrator based on distance, ping distance, right? But essentially, if you could convert all transcoders into orchestrators in a sense, where you're eliminating, I should say, you're eliminating the orchestrator and the transcoder is doing the work directly, then the router, you could set that as your endpoint, and the media server would then go to the router and say, hey, where would you like me to send this stream? and all the router can be configured highly customizable from the orchestrator standpoint on what transcoders get the work and all these things without actually having to send the media to it. So that is kind of what we're building now, but the problem still remains. An O/T running on each people's computers, it still requires port 8935 to be open and running into lots of firewall issues. So that's why, like for instance, the tight node pool, and I think Video Miner 2 and Live Pool all run the O and then a bunch of T's around it. I've looked at making it run as like everyone runs an O/T, and then you just have the router point to which one to go to. But firewalls are such a pain that you can't really get the average person to join the network in that sense. So this would be bypassing that in a way. So yeah. Great. Any other topics or nuances you wanted to cover about your write-up?
I think that's pretty much it. I'm probably forgetting something. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
Sure.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Go ahead, Jen.
Hey, Philnema, great to hear you. I want to make sure I understand the geolocation dynamics of that. So do the orchestrator and the transcoders have to be geolocated, or can the orchestrator route anywhere in the world? Like, what's the required?
Anyway, yeah.
Interesting.
Cool thing is you could be talking to an orchestrator on the other side of the world and get referred to a transcoder next door, and then directly connect next door, rather than having to go around the world and back.
Fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, that would be absolutely amazing. So yeah, very good upgrade.
Kind of kills all that work that you're working on with the router right now, but I think it's still a great. It would be. I think this would be a much slicker way of doing it.
Well, not necessarily, because what are the upgrades going to look like? I mean, how is it going to find the nearest transcoder? What metrics are going to be used? That's what we've been trying to figure out with the router. Because we used a ping system. We said, okay, why doesn't the router, ping every transcoder or get every orchestrator to ping the media server, get their responses, and then figure out who's the closest. But not all media servers or computers or whatever reply to ping requests, right? So all of a sudden you have like you can't really use that as a proper tool. So we're trying to figure out more ways to figure out how do you determine which transcoder or which orchestrator is nearest, right? And so that's an issue that I think this upgrade will run into, right? Thol, have you thought about how? I mean, we're at high level, and the how hasn't come yet. But how do we find the nearest transcoder to your media server?
I mean, one of the easiest options, of course, is GeoIP, where you convert the IP address into a geolocation on the planet, and if they're close to each other, then they're probably close to each other network-wise too. Oversimplification, but it generally works.
Right.
A fact that is even more interesting, I think, rather than which is the best in terms of location, is determining the best based on more properties than just speed/nearness. What if there's a transcoder on the other side of the planet that will reply atrociously slow to your requests, but does like the absolute best transcoding you could wish? It does really good quality per bit. Don't need to deliver it right now. It's fine if it takes a year. Whatever. I'm talking extreme here. Then, for that person, that is actually the best choice right then, even though it might be the furthest away transcoder that there is.
Right. So the capabilities of the transcoder can be directly sent to, this media server that can find the best answer to what they're looking for. But
Exactly.
so the
Might differ per stream.
the broadcaster right now does a lot of that. It figures out, price, it does a lot of the logic. By eliminating the broadcaster, you'd have to now offload that logic onto the media server. So
Sort of, yeah. I mean, the thing is, both the orchestrator and the broadcaster have a collecting and a narrowing role, in the sense that the orchestrator collects multiple transcoders that it can offer, but it can also decide not to offer them all. And the broadcaster gets these offers from multiple orchestrators, can then forward all of the transcoders it hears about, or it can narrow it down to a particular selection based on parameters or its own preferences or whatever. And that's kind of the power of the network. You get multiple layers of people helping find the best one, and each can focus on a particular area of interest.
Yeah, which would be really great, because then we could rely less on, Livepeer Inc. for all the streams. Because right now, for instance, my pool, I only put orchestrators on where the ingest servers are for Livepeer Inc. So the idea is, Livepeer Inc. is in Los Angeles, so I will put an orchestrator node there, which is on top of their broadcaster node, which is on top of the media server node. So all those have really low latency, and then from there, transcoders can go and do the work, which is great for Livepeer Inc. because there's not much delay between those. There is a bit, but not much. But if anyone else wants to come and spin up a media server and use Livepeer, well, I don't know where they are, and do I care to start up an orchestrator node on top of them? And so, yeah, if they spin one up in Mexico City, well, the nearest one is Los Angeles, and there could be a transcoder in Mexico City, but it's going to Los Angeles and back again, very unnecessarily. So by handing off the delegation to the media server and then skipping the orchestrator, that's where you're getting the optimization. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah.
Cool.
That's exactly the thing
And
I
again,
kind
it's
of dislike right now.
yeah, and it's not eliminating the orchestrator. It's just changing the role of the orchestrator to be more of I like Phil's analogy of being an agent
Yeah,
to really
I
kind
like
of
to think of it as purifying the role rather than changing it, right? We're going more for what they should be doing rather than what they are doing.
I like that. I like that analogy too. Yes. Yeah,
Maybe
because again, there's no need to send that stream through an extra machine. There's no benefit to it. I mean, it just adds more points of failure and slows things down.
And there's inadvertently actually another security buff that just came, which is we have to have our orchestrator keys on the orchestrator that receives the media, which is open to the public. So for some reason, if you wanted to break into one of my servers and steal my key, that's surprisingly obvious where my keys are held. And so we had to come up with a whole system around secondary dummy keys to protect ourselves. It just seems like, why would we even have crypto keys on a media server to begin with that is public?
Yep.
It
That's exactly the thing. All of the crypto stuff should not be touching where the media is happening. And that definitely lowers the attack surface for problems.
Yeah, there would be a pretty big security buff when it comes to the crypto side of it, right?
Yeah.
Because yeah, as you know, I'm a bit paranoid of crypto, about security. I've lost many keys and I've lost many coins, and it seems unnecessary to be mixing in the media server with keys of any kind that don't need to be there.
Yep, completely agree.
Okay. Great. I want to move on a little bit to AV1 and upgradability of different codec and these kinds of things. Right now, Livepeer doesn't support AV1 encoding decoding, mostly, I believe, because of FFmpeg, the custom FFmpeg code that we're running has a lot of changes to it, and it would be very cumbersome to upgrade. I believe we want to, but we we have to get around to it. What is the importance of AV1 adoption for Livepeer and the future of the network?
So I would say AV1 itself is not super important because it is just a stepping stone among many. Just like H.264 until now is, it's the stone we're currently standing on. AV1 is the next one we're going to be standing on. But there will be another after that, and another, etc. And I feel like as we keep improving technology faster and faster, and this has been happening the last few years, right? It's been speeding up. That's each step will be shorter than the next. So rather than AV1 itself being important, and I think it is because it is again the next step, right? I think it's important that we have the flexibility to quickly make the steps. So I'm thinking a little bit further in the sense that AV1 is not the problem. The problem is that it has taken so long to implement AV1 in Livepeer because it's not easy to add new codecs. And I think the key thing we need to solve is making it easier to add new codecs so that we can take each future step faster. To keep in sync with technology evolving.
Do you have any ideas on how we could improve upgradability of codec or adding new ones that become popular?
Yeah, I think this really should not be part of the protocol itself, but there should be like a kind of like when transcoders advertise what they can do, they should list the codecs they're capable of, any particular settings they can apply, stuff like that. Then the orchestrator can say, I have these transcoders available that can handle this particular job that you wanted because they handle that codec. And then the broadcaster can list all transcoders among all the orchestrators that they talk to that can do this job. And then, the media server can pick, I like that one, and do that. And you completely don't need to encode any of this in the protocol or any of that at all. And by not putting that in there, that means that you can change this practically every day if you wanted to. And if someone wanted to launch a new transcoder that can talk a new codec that was just released, well, nothing is stopping them besides being able to compile it.
Very good. Just give me one moment. I just gotta grab the door. 1 second.
While we wait for that, anyone else have a question or a remark?
Yeah. So, I know that FFmpeg's been really baked into Livepeer. What I guess a high level, like what types of things are baked into that or have been changed, and why is it so hard to update it to a current version?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, the main issue is that there were particular patches applied that only worked against fairly old versions of FFmpeg. And the result of that is that updating to newer versions becomes hard because those patches no longer work. And there are quite a few there that are actually necessary for the base operations. One of the things I would like to be doing, and this theoretically becomes possible once we have the streaming workflow in place, is make it easier to integrate other transcoders than FFmpeg. And that makes it so that, well, it might still be FFmpeg in the end, because that's the easiest transcoder in terms of what's available, but it could also be GStreamer, for example, or anything else that can handle a transcode. It could also be a different version of FFmpeg, right? As long as these protocols that it needs to speak are supported, it should be able to be supported.
Right. So it's basically just moving out all the stuff that was been modified to make FFmpeg work just into a separate area that doesn't intertwine or doesn't combine the two. I mean,
Yeah, and a lot of this work
from
was also done
a
because
non-programmer's
things are combined,
standpoint. Say that
right?
again.
Because
I was
the O and the T are often running combined, and that means that all the tasks that need to happen, so many of these are not related to the media exactly, but they're just extra requirements that are introduced by how things are built. And if we're splitting up the concerns by doing the media on the transcoder and nothing else, that means that the only thing you have to focus on is the media itself. So you gain a lot more freedom in terms of how you can implement certain things. That makes it easier to switch to a different implementation.
Yeah, everything that you've said, I'm ready to get, I'm ready to see it happen like as fast as possible. So that you get my vote.
Sometimes it helps to have that perspective of someone that's actually working with media rather than just someone that works in Web3.
Yeah, Thol, do you think that most of that integration is in like the LPMS more so than just Livepeer itself? Is that where a lot of those
Hopefully,
changes would
yes.
go? Yeah.
We hope to completely not touch the Livepeer protocol itself and only do things in like the media-related parts. But whether that's possible, we're still trying to determine that.
So there's a lot of upgrades that you just mentioned. Do you believe that this is something that can be done in a few weeks? These seem like some pretty big upgrades, especially with like the codec and the AV1. Like, seems like a pretty big overhaul. What kind of resources do you need in order to do something like this?
So the thing is, changing the core into this different system is not all that hard. I think that can be done in a few weeks, and that's what we hope to actually accomplish. But that doesn't mean that every option and possibility that I've talked about immediately becomes available. It just means that they're easier to implement after that. Think of it more as a foundation for all that extra work. And with a good foundation, you can build a lot faster. Does that make sense?
Right. Very good. I
And
like it.
hopefully, once the foundation is in place, we can split up who does what and have multiple teams working in parallel on some of these things.
Is this something that you'll be working with? Oh, geez. Is this something you would be working with the Livepeer team on doing? Is this someone like that Miss Server is going to be contributing on? Like, who will you be doing this yourself, or what can we do as a community to help support this initiative?
Yeah, so the initial work on what that foundation is going to look like and what is achievable within the month is going to be a cooperation between the Miss Server team and the Livepeer team, including myself. I will be part of the part of the Miss Server team that will be working on this, but also more, not just me. And I think with the people that we now have brought together that can work on this, we should be able to get a good foundation up and going this month still. Should doesn't mean it will, but I hope so.
Yeah, definitely. Is this going to be open for, like, obviously, through GitHub and it's all public?
Yeah.
Are there going to be working groups that the public can join, or is this kind of go fast with a small group of people internally?
Yeah, I'd like to go for the not too many cooks in the kitchen kind of approach, where you have a few domain experts that contribute to that foundation. And then as further we get away from the foundation, the more I would like to open it up to community contribution, because that's where that can really shine.
Very good. I like it. We've been at this for just about an hour now. Do we have any last comments or topics that from the community around this topic? Any last questions or comments? Great. Okay. Well, what we'll do is, I think we'll just end it there. I believe Doug is going to be coming back, but Thol, thank you so much for your time. I know it's late there, and I know that it's hard to get around to these calls late at night. So I do appreciate your time coming in and talking to us. And I believe you have full support of the community, and we really like these ideas. So thank you for your hard work.
Glad to hear it, and yeah, no problem. And I'll try and be in touch as much as possible about what we're working on and what direction things are going to try and get feedback as much as possible.
Sounds good. As always, you're free to stick around and hang out. But we're going to be waiting for Doug now to come back, and we'll move on to the public funding items. So thanks again, Thol, and yeah.
Thanks, Thol. Always appreciate having you here.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so what we'll do is we don't really have any other topics to go through. While we wait for Doug to come back, I do want to quickly go over one topic which I did have, which is pretty relevant, and it's more of just banter until we move on to it, which was the Discord issue that we have. Does anyone know what happened with Discord? I got kicked out and had to come back and get my roles reassigned to me. Does anyone know what happened?
I know what happened.
Doug, do you want to just share us the issue with Discord? Just spend like 30 seconds on it, and then we'll move into the public goods funding area.
Yeah, sorry, this is good. I jumped off the call 45 minutes ago to hop on something else, and showed up at just the right time, I guess. Yeah, so actually for like the first time in, the 6 years we've had Twitter and Gitter and Discord and everything, that was the first time we've actually had like a compromise of one of the key accounts. And so, without getting into too many details, one of the accounts that had, a high level of permissions in the server was compromised, and still need to do some work to figure out exactly how that occurred. But the attacker basically used the access that they gained in order to kick a bunch of privilege roles out of the server, change some permissions on the announcements channel and the general channel, and obviously send out some messages promoting scams and some pretty vulgar and hateful messages to other people, which is terrible. Sorry for anyone who had to experience that. And sort of until a super admin could be available and get on and boot that account, much of that remained up. And then as I think there probably was like a 1.5 or 2 hour period where that server sort of was in that state before we were able to remove that account. We have the admin logs to see all the actions that were taken, so did our best to undo them and re-grant the missing permissions. And big knock on wood here, but knock on wood, I think things should be back in working and secure order. I think a couple things slipped through the cracks that were a little weird. Titan, you experienced this where it's like, maybe if you were just unbanned, your account would have like retained all of its roles, but I don't know if you clicked through the invite link and then used that bot to assign like the member role, which sort of like deleted all the other roles. So I had to like manually re-add that back. Same for Pawn and a couple others. But hopefully everyone has the roles and access that they need right now. And if not, ping me and we'll get it sorted.
Yeah. I ended up, because I just didn't see the server there, and I was like, oh, I have to rejoin it again. So I found the public invite and rejoined, and I was a member again. And I thought, oh boy, how am I going to start the Livepeer water cooler chat if I can't start an event? So I was panicking. So that was great fun.
Yeah, sorry.
No, well, not your fault. It's a part of managing things. So, yeah, I'm glad that things are back together and you got the security under it. So, without further ado, let's jump into the public goods funding and a little bit about the topic that you have on the hot plate. So, tell us, give us an abstract around what you're thinking, what your ideas are, and let's jump into it.
Sounds good. And just a quick check, because I was off the call for a while. Did you guys have the time to wrap up Fool's presentation on the kind of infrastructure topic?
Yeah, we ended it.
I'm not interrupting that, am I?
No, we ended it 10 seconds after before you came, so it was like perfect timing. It was really, really good.
Perfect. Okay, so then let's transition to talk about public goods funding. Something I'm really excited about. Something that I think has been called for and is sort of long overdue for this group getting together to, we've been talking about it for years, but actually move towards taking action to address this within the Livepeer ecosystem, is just big picture, thinking about how we can be sure that Livepeer as a project can be sustainable going forward, and that contributors and developers and video builders and node operators and whoever is part of this big ecosystem knows that the protocol kind of has the built-in mechanisms to ensure that they have the opportunity to receive the funding required, or the rewards required, or the incentives required to know that the work that they're doing that contribute to Livepeer will be rewarded, right? And that's a really strong principle. I think that the protocol itself, as it was designed 6 years ago, has done a decent job at that for motivating certain set of contributors to the project. I think node operators and token holding delegators and anyone who's a little bit politically minded in terms of campaigning around the contributions they're making has been able to access that funding through the protocol inflation and through the sort of built-in inflation funding mechanism where new tokens are minted every round. I think there's been a couple entities that have stepped up to plug other gaps that exist. One is Livepeer Inc., which has sort of used token that it got in Genesis to actually raise a bunch of investment, a lot of investment relative to that amount of token that it's invested in doing core development on the on Livepeer and the whole ecosystem, and focusing on demand generation and productization and whatnot. The grants program is another entity that's filled the gap. It's used the inflation funding to sort of earn LPT little by little and then route it towards a bunch of different type of applicants making different types of contribution. But we haven't had this sort of built-in flexible treasury that you see many projects have adapted, in the 6 years since Livepeer has been designed, that has been used to various degrees of success in sort of providing the sustainable funding for ecosystems. And when you think about treasuries, you think about how they're governed and how people make decisions that allocate tokens out of them towards different parties. And so, I've shared a pre-proposal in the Livepeer forum, which is the result of a lot of sort of discussions with this community over the years and ideas and studying other ecosystems to think about how Livepeer may introduce sort of the sustainable funding mechanism and a treasury and governance over it. I called it the Livepeer Delta pre-proposal because Delta was the next phase in Livepeer's decentralization roadmap. I'll emphasize it's a pre-proposal. It's meant just to instill ideas and to form discussion and to get feedback. And then from there, we can think about taking it through the actual, the evolution of it through the governance process and, having an on-chain vote and ratifying it and deploying any updates that are required based on whatever it comes, based on all the feedback and discussion. So I will give an overview of it, but let me just pause there and see if that sort of setting of the table was helpful, or if you have any questions you want me to dive into before the overview.
I haven't read the forum post, but if anyone wants to post it in the water cooler side chat here, please do so. But yeah, if anyone else has any questions or comments about it so far.
Yep, I'm pasting it right here in the chat. It's a long post, so I wouldn't recommend reading it on the fly here necessarily. And there's a bunch of comments that have come in already, but I'll give an overview.
Great.
So
go ahead.
Yeah, I think I talked about the spirit. I would say if there's a couple challenges that we haven't been able to solve really well so far. One is, how do we get Livepeer token in the hands of the video builder profile? These are developers, designers, creators, product people that are focused on building like the killer breakout apps at the intersection of video and blockchain. There's no way for the protocol to reward them. There's no way for the protocol to make them, owners in the network. You might question, why does that matter? I think that whole community of people that are pushing the boundaries there should be doing that with the Livepeer community and doing it within the Livepeer context. And that's where the leading ideas should be discussed. That's where we should be building together to innovate, to enable like the new cool breakout applications. I think, that one of the great examples, I don't see the Xenon folks on this call, but they're a great example of this profile, and they've naturally gravitated to the community and run a node and taken a stake in the network. But not every video builder is going to run a node, and they shouldn't, right? They shouldn't be infrastructure operators if they're focused on the application. So it'd be great to get more of that profile into this community, and Livepeer token is a really powerful mechanism for doing that, without using incentives and the token. I think we're trying to build that community with one arm tied behind our back. That's one challenge. I think when you talk about the amount of token that's available, the grants node has done a great job of sort of building a an initial treasury, but they're doing it through the inflation funding mechanism and through a campaign, and only the people that stake towards it are contributing. And it's the amount of capital that's being raised there isn't necessarily significant enough to make an enormous impact when you look at the budget that it has. And so it's interesting to think about, should the protocol itself, the whole protocol, the whole ecosystem, actually sort of front the cost, not for the grants program to manage necessarily, but for a treasury to be available. And so that's another sort of interesting area. And the last one I'll highlight is something the orchestrator community has discussed quite a bit, is you kind of recognize the challenges of the stake weighted job distribution and the quote unquote like fairness in terms of access to the fees that are available on the network. And a lot of orchestrators feel like they're investing a lot in their nodes, they're helping the community, they're doing great work, which is all true. And the rewards that they can earn through the ETH fees haven't necessarily felt like a fairly recognizing compensation for the work they're putting in. Which is partially true because a protocol can't recognize all that type of contribution. You actually need some sort of subjective judgment. And I know like there's been programs like the Titan Node Startup Grant and these sorts of things that have aimed to fill that gap, which maybe could still be used or expanded under this sort of program. But I think it's interesting to think about this treasury creating this pool of token, which are not just automatically divvied out according to stake by a math formula and a smart contract, but that actually give the community control over how to route those tokens to better reward and incentivize orchestrators, better reward and incentivize video builders, expand what the grants program can do, et cetera. So those are some of the problems that we're solving. In short, the proposal recommends creation of a treasury. I think there's two big questions to answer around that. How do Livepeer tokens get into the treasury, and how do governance decisions about the use of those tokens get made? And it proposes answers for both of them. My proposal for how tokens get into the treasury is that the community sets a percentage of tokens each round that just go straight into the treasury from the protocol. And then the rest of the tokens get split up the way that they do right now amongst the orchestrators and their rewards calls and their delegators accordingly. As far as how the treasury gets governed, and let me give the 10-second overview and then I'll just pause because we'll probably want to dive into details on follow-ups. I propose using Livepeer's existing stake-weighted governance to vote on proposals for removing tokens from the treasury into another address. But where the nuance is, I call that tier 1, is using like Livepeer's existing governance to route tokens from the treasury to an address. My kind of catch here is I don't think those recipients that the receiving address should be like individual grant recipients or individual teams or entities that are building. I think instead those tokens should go to what I call tier 2 entities, which are like programs or DAOs or groups that make proposals of how they themselves are going to route tokens to sort of the end recipients based on their own expertise. And so, for example, I think like an orchestrator DAO made of the orchestrators should be the ones to govern how orchestrators get subjectively rewarded for their contribution retroactively from that pool. And video builders should be the ones who determine what applications and video innovators are receiving funding retroactively for their contributions. And I think the grants program has a role where they're focused on proactively getting tokens in the hands of people who need them in order to build maybe small, in smaller allocations. And so that's sort of the highlight of my proposal. Hard to do in text without the diagram. There's some diagrams in the forum post, but I will pause there for follow-up questions and discussion. I have a bunch of questions for the community as well, but want to make sure everyone understands the proposal first.
Hi, Dob, you okay?
Hey.
Right, I've been asked to ask you a question. We're looking for feedback on Nico's feedback on the forum. Can you comment on that, please?
Say that again. Can I comment on what?
Oh, right, sorry. Have you seen the Nico's feedback on the forum about this proposal?
Oh, Nico's post.
Yeah.
Yeah. So before I do that, does anyone have questions on sort of how this treasury and the governance over it would work at a very high level?
Yeah, I guess when you talked about tier one and tier two kind of funding mechanisms, you'd have the tier one funding the tier twos, and the tier twos would be, I'll just selfishly, I'll pick the Titan node startup grant. Would that be, and maybe there was a few of us right now, it's just kind of directed by me, but if there was a few of us and we converted it into a DAO, and would that be the example of a tier two funding proposal where it hands it out to the people who subjectively qualify for the grant, and then but it receives the funding ultimately from the tier one, which is baked into, I guess, which is the treasury. Is that kind of the definitions of tier ones and tier twos?
Yep, that's exactly right. And by the way, it's worth recognizing like this tier two concept is maybe only socially enforced by the people, that are voting on chain, sort of recognizing what we think tier one is supposed to allocate tokens into. So yeah, you'd make a proposal, you'd say, hey, we're Titan Node Community Startup Grant DAO. Here's the 3 members of the DAO. We're proposing for 20,000 Livepeer tokens, which allows us to run this program for 6 months. We intend to, reward 4 different startup orchestrator grants. We've seen that this has been effective in the past. We'll be back in 6 months to report on how it went and potentially make another proposal for an additional round, right? And that's an example of a tier 2 entity making a proposal.
Would the tier one vote be the on-chain voting then, is what you kind of mentioned?
Yes. So that would be like, and my proposal says the stake weighted voting using our current governance, right? So it would be, all of the existing Livepeer token holders voting yes or no on that proposal.
Great. And we can start really using that voting mechanism on Arbitrum because it's so cheap to vote now. So it'll be great.
That's right. Cool. Okay. So yeah, why don't I can answer Tom's question now, because hopefully that example was helpful for everyone in understanding how it might work. So Nico's response in the forum said, thanks for putting this together. I agree that Livepeer needs a DAO treasury, but I disagree it should be funded by inflation. And then summarizing, he said that Livepeer Inc. should fund it retroactively because there should have been a DAO treasury since Genesis. And the fact that it was an oversight should not be paid for by community members. And he says something about Livepeer Inc. being funded by investors who bought token at a discount, though that's a complete misassumption and that's not correct factually. So that's the comment. I have lots of thoughts on that. I'm just wondering, I'm curious if anyone here shares that reaction and thinks, no, we shouldn't, it doesn't make sense for the community as a whole to fund this treasury. Only Livepeer Inc. should fund it.
Well, the way I see Livepeer Inc. is another participant in the protocol, and so I don't know why we would single out one participant in the protocol over other participants if that participant isn't actually favored in any extra particular way built into the protocol. So, I would disagree with that. but I have not looked at his full comments, and I've not had time to think about it. So that's just my initial reaction.
Yep. Yep. And like in his defense, and to something you just mentioned, like, has Livepeer Inc. been favored anyway? In a way, like, you know, it did reserve an allocation from the genesis of the protocol. And you know, not every other entity in this ecosystem had that opportunity, right? I would argue it's been a very good shepherd of that. That was to ensure sustainable and ongoing development of Livepeer. And like I said, for 6 years, it has outpunched its weight, if you will, by accessing far more capital than the value of those tokens that it held represented, and used that to shepherd this protocol, hopefully, in what everyone thinks is good spirits, and it continues to do so and will continue to do so. But I also share that reaction that the Livepeer only works if Livepeer Inc. is only one entity that is not favored and doesn't have any special status here. And part of this is, taking steps to ensure we can decentralize for many reasons, now and in the future.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that if we're aiming for decentralization, it makes sense to fund it with community inflation. Actually, I think it's a great idea. Determining what the percentage should be is a good question, but
definitely.
Yeah, like I would say that the inflation currently is, basically completely supply side driven, or supply side incentivized, and which is great until the point where where we have so much supply and not enough demand. And I personally would part ways from inflation in order to to start incentivizing demand side, right? Like if I had to take a 50% haircut on my inflation rewards to incentivize people to build on Livepeer, I would probably do that, because I think that would overall, rising tides, lifts all boats. So that I would be getting less inflation, but the inflation would mean more because the protocol is building. So I do think that, yeah, if we can build it into the benefit of having an ERC20 token is the ability to control, and not control, but to come up with unique ways of doing things. And so, yeah, I think taking it out of inflation would be fine.
And to your point, Titan, I have one other question. Like the difference between funding Video Builder DAO and Orchestrator DAO, would that work through the same voting mechanism? And also the retroactive rewards, does that? I'm trying to get a definition on what retroactive rewards would mean.
Yeah, good questions. Couple points to respond to through that range of comments. One is, Titan, you threw out that 50% haircut number. Thanks for throwing that out, right? We don't know what percentage the community would be comfortable with, and that's a great opportunity to get feedback. My post mentioned 15. I know Ben in a comment mentioned 5. The cool thing is I'm proposing that just be a governance parameter. And so, we'd approve a proposal that sets it at X percent, whatever that is, 10%, 15%, 5%. And then the treasury would start to fill up slowly, right? It's just taking a little token out each round. And over time, the community can judge, hey, is it enough? Should we up that? How is inflation percentage changed? Is there too much in there? So that's a cool concept. So related to the lead encoders questions. Okay, so I know you had one of them, which was would Orchestrator DAO, Video Builder DAO access funding through the same mechanism? I would highlight those are just example, like tier 2 entities that I recommend because I think they're good ideas, but it's not even formalized exactly what those things are or how they would work. They're just examples of tier 2 entities who would make proposals to say, hey, we are Orchestrator DAO. we're made up of the 100 active orchestrators on this date who each hold a badge on chain. We've already deployed a governor framework DAO smart contract on Tally, so anyone can observe how the voting is going to work. And we're going to run a funding round that does X, Y, and Z, right? And do you vote yes or no to release 50,000 LPT to us? And then that proposal goes on chain and could vote. And then the video builder DAO could work completely differently. It could say we're a committee of 8 people. We've been building on Livepeer for 2 years. We want to run a program that does X, Y, and Z, right? And that would be another proposal up to layer 1. So that's how it works. Oh, you also asked about retroactive versus sort of proactive. Yep. So the typical thing that we've seen in our grants program so far, not exclusive, but typically it's been people who show up and make a proposal for what they're going to build. And they say how much capital they need in order to build it. And then they're maybe awarded a grant or not awarded a grant to do that. And the idea is they use that funding to fund the development. And oftentimes that may mean that what they're doing is they're receiving token, they're selling it, and they're using it to eat, to pay rent, to pay developers, et cetera. And that can be good for a certain set of tasks. If you have a very mercenary type task where you need something to pay for something in order to get it built, and the benefit that's going to bring the community, that can be effective, right? There's been a bunch of research and philosophy and experiments in the DAO world, the Web3 world, around retroactive funding and the regular world as well, which works sort of the opposite. That's where hey, there's this pool of capital available, and it's going to be divvied out after the fact to people who apply to indicate what they've already done or what they have contributed. And then they receive sort of the rewards after the fact that enables them to hopefully, become a committed, and more tightly connected long-term stakeholder in this ecosystem by having the token, staking it, participating in governance, or they can use it for funding too, but to continue to invest it and build off of the back of the demonstrated contribution they've already made, right? And in the orchestrator community, I think you've seen that where, it's such a strong community and people are so incredible in terms of the tooling that they build and how everyone helps one another out and how they evolve the tooling based on feedback. And I can see the orchestrator community being so much more trusting and effective at rewarding retroactive grants to the one another for those contributions than imagine someone showing up in the orchestrator channel and saying, hey, will you pay me 1,000 LPT if I build a notification bot or something? And you might say, well, we already have that and it's working and it's so strong and this person maintains it and they want to evolve it. You'd almost want to sort of bias towards the ones who have demonstrated that they're doing it not just for sort of mercenary type financial reasons. And so that's sort of the retroactive versus proactive model. You can look at Optimism's retroactive public goods funding rounds. You can look at Gitcoin that has run a bunch of rounds around this and other examples in the space as well.
Probably somewhere in the middle though, because I know I've done quite a few grants, and I'd be very disappointed if I spent the time and energy to put the grant together, do the work, and then only to find the grant proposal was declined after the fact. You know what I mean? If I did the work and then they just declined me, and now, I did the grant, I'd be a very sour taste in my mouth.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I think it's just different programs for different purposes. So in that case, Mike, if you needed the capital in order to spend the time or the money to invest in the thing, that would be a great candidate for a proactive
Okay,
program.
I see. Yeah.
Right?
All right. That
Right.
makes sense.
Whereas if you said hey, I've built X, Y, and Z tool and you all use it every day and I hope it's really helpful. Some things that I want to do in the future are, X, Y, and Z, like I think I'm a good candidate to receive retroactive funding or whatnot, then I think that would be recognized and rewarded, because the community would want you to be a sort of long-term Livepeer ecosystem participant and token holder.
Sounds like a NFT badge system where you get a couple grand. Those approval processes might only need one approval before then sooner or later they automatically approve because they just know you're producing good content. I guess if you have that NFT, that badge that shows that you're the one building, a lot of the community will rally behind you.
Totally. Yeah, I
Can
think
I jump
on-chain
in here?
credentialing is like a huge part. Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Hey, Mike, that's an awesome idea. And Pawn, you also asked a good question in the forum that I wanted to respond to about the future of grants. And I think as Doug laid out, the difference between kind of more riskier forward-looking funding that happens through grants and the retroactive funding, I think there's a role for grants to provide that pipeline of projects that are, qualified and should be eligible for retroactive funding. And I think that idea of like tagging and badging people who have, successfully completed any kind of, project in the ecosystem, whether that's having completed a grant or just generally being, a high impact demand side project in the ecosystem, we definitely want ways to be able to tag those and look at on-chain mechanisms for tagging so that, we can start to develop on-chain mechanisms to identify and reward people who have done good work. So I really love what you suggested.
Well,
Awesome.
thanks, Shannon.
Well, let's look for
Yeah,
an NFT Livepeer grant from Mike Zuper coming up then.
Love it.
Go ahead, Doug. Sorry.
All good. I was gonna switch gears to the distribution, which is and how are delegators incentivized to vote. So that's a really good and important question. I think it's actually at the core. One of the core things that's being debated is whether the current stake-weighted voting is the right, fair, and effective way to do the tier one governance altogether. That's the way it works in Livepeer via the original governance proposal 3 years ago, but it doesn't mean it's the best mechanism or ultimate way it should work going forward. As a reminder of how it works is all the orchestrators vote on governance proposals, and they carry the weight of all the stake on their node by default. And that means they carry all their delegators' stake with them as they're voting. Their delegators don't have to show up, but if they see that their orchestrator has voted in a way and they disagree, then they can change their vote, which takes their stake sort of off of where their orchestrator voted and moves it to the other side. All votes are yes or no. So that's how it works. And of course, in stake-weighted voting distribution like that, those who have a lot of stake have a lot of power by default. And we've seen that create challenges in other governance systems. We've seen it create challenges in Livepeer in like our fee distribution mechanism, as we've seen, right? And so, our job distribution mechanism, and so that is a good question whether that's the right mechanism. I think there's some discussion in the forum. Hunter in particular chimed in and proposed, maybe it should be a council where the stake-weighted voting elects a council rather than every vote coming down to stake. People talk about ideas like quadratic voting and credential voting. I think they all suffer from different trade-offs. Suffer might not be the right word. They all have different trade-offs, including some feel centralized and arbitrary. Some feel subject to Sybil attacks and different types of attacks. Some feel like a lot of custom work and effort relative to the gain that you get, and they're really complicated. Right, right? But there's no easy answer there. So yeah, curious to people's reactions around this notion of orchestrators carrying the stake of their delegation with them, and whether this is a safe mechanism for our community.
I tend to be along the lines of, American government, civil class, civics class rather, where, you just need the proper checks and balances in place. And I don't know exactly what those might be, but something to smooth it out. And if, again, where we fall short as the originators of the ideas for these checks and balances, just put a mechanism in place that allows us to rectify it and fix it, and I think with those principles going in, I'm pretty sure over time this stuff can work itself out. I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet for the first day you pass the first proposal and all of a sudden everything's magic, right? Like I feel like there's probably going to be some iteration involved here.
Yeah, definitely right. I think anything that gets enacted, the governance mechanism can also be used to change and iterate on. But it is interesting. It's the same governance mechanism, right? So if someone doesn't like the outcome of one tier one voting proposal because it drains the whole treasury to an account where we didn't expect it to go, then it could be those same voters who are the ones who have to step up to actually make the change to prevent that again, and that could
That's right.
could present challenges.
Yep.
Great.
Doug, I'll maybe also jump in on the how delegators are incentivized to vote question, and early foreshadowing, I guess, for the what's to come. I would say, I mean, I've been involved in the Livepeer project for a year and a half now, and I think the delegator community is still the one that we have like the least visibility into. It's hard to identify who are actual individual delegators, but I think once we we're working on some ideas for how we can better do that, and I'd actually love to get the orchestrator community's feedback on just that task of like how do we better identify and connect with delegators in the network. I'm curious, how folks on this call like think about connecting with your delegators, and if there's anything we can do to support that, because you can't. It's hard to incentivize delegators when we don't know where they are or how to reach them. So I guess, the question is like, what ideas do you have, or what would you like to see in terms of how we do better connect and grow that identified community?
Well, the first thing I was thinking is the fact of the matter is, anyone can use a smart contract. So it's going to be hard to track, but like, I think we do know quite a few people use the Livepeer Explorer. So like, I asked this question, when they started redoing the Livepeer Explorer, is that perhaps, there's insights in that the users that are using that system that we can look at to determine behavior of somebody who's staking. So like being able to understand what screens are they looking at, what metrics are they using to filter and find orchestrators and their yield, and what are the types of things they're doing in there that might start to present a pattern around the behavior of the delegators, and perhaps using content or calculators or more content on the Explorer site, we could perhaps start to educate them. I think it's probably going to end up being education. How do they determine the most value add in terms of staking with an orchestrator, right? And then maybe there is some sort of sign up sheet that they can sign up for. Or maybe it's hey, claim your badge now, so that maybe we can start to see the ETH addresses and their badges in terms of how maybe we can interact with them in some of those ways. I don't know. These are just some of the things that I've been thinking about, but more than open to some other ideas too.
Building on Mike's idea, I do think that the Explorer is a good place to give that visibility. And ENS profiles are, they're working fine for orchestrators today. That could give an opportunity for a delegator to put their contact info out there, and we have some tools today to look at ETH addresses, but it's just not that mature. But that would be really nice, and then we could even get into further optimization with like notifications and such, ways that you could notify a delegator of a potential fee change that's upcoming or something like that.
I wrote all those down. Those are great ideas.
Great. Well, I like where this conversation is going, and I think it's really constructive and important. If you want to read the forum post, please read the full forum post by Doug and comment and supply any feedback. I think that would be great. Doug, what is the timeline for this going forward? Is there a time that you want to receive feedback? A time that you'd like to? What is your roadmap kind of look like for deploying something like this?
Yeah, really good question. So the time for feedback is definitely now and in the coming weeks. I think what's happening concurrently as we hold these discussions and look at feedback and discuss is that we're beginning to look at like existing tooling and frameworks to use so we don't have to build out entire user interfaces and tools to allow people to participate in governance. Looking at things like Prop House from NounsDAO, where they used to make proposals and allocate out funds, or um, the Tally Governor framework, or the retroactive goods funding mechanisms from JokeDAO and from Optimism and whatnot. And so, kind of as we evaluate those tools, as we figure out how to plug them into and map them on to Livepeer's existing protocol, I think that sort of research phase will occur over the next like three-ish weeks. And then based on all the feedback and everything, we could probably move to the proposal phase and the governance and the voting phase. And then typically it takes, I don't know, another month plus to work things through that process and to actually build and do the implementation and test and then audit depending on if there's protocol changes needed or not. And so we're probably looking for like end of June when maybe we would deploy an updated framework and be able to kick off the first rounds that fund the treasury and even proposals into the treasury from there, maybe in July or so. So I think that's probably the timeline, but that's all contingent on the feedback and getting to some sort of community excitement around some form that this proposal ends up taking.
I like it. That sounds great. Yeah, before we finish up, we got about 15 minutes left at max. Are there any nuances that we didn't cover, Doug, or anything that you'd like to cover that you haven't talked about yet?
Good question. There's definitely a ton of nuance and trade-offs in here. I asked some open questions at the end of the post as well. Trying to think what's worth focusing on. I guess if we zoom in, because this is the orchestrator call, and I realize the other profiles may have totally different perspectives as well, so need to speak to them all. But on the orchestrator side, if we just take this theoretical orchestrator DAO concept, and let's say you want to run a couple rounds where people make proposals and you vote to distribute funds to a couple O's in each of those rounds to reward them for work they've done. Does that feel, just finger in the air reaction, does that feel like it would be a positive, like it would have good impact, like it would help address some of the frustrations that have occurred due to, you know, not enough demand to go around, to keep the nodes busy, to earn the fees for everything that's all the work that's been put in? Does it feel helpful to this community?
Well, obviously, I can't speak on behalf of the community, and so I'll get other people's feedback in a sec. But I would say that we are probably most motivated by increasing demand on the network. So, like, even if we had an orchestrator DAO, to promote more orchestrators or orchestrator tooling would be great, but promoting demand side initiatives would probably be the highest degree of interest from the community, is kind of my guess. So, I don't know if that answers your question or anything, but does anyone else want to chime in?
My question back was going to be, has like lack of a pool of funding been a blocker for the orchestrator community doing that already?
I don't think there's been a noticeable lack. I mean, I know we do have an existing grants process, and I'm talking about like development from a supply side, you know, like enhancements to the orchestrator transcoding experience, or even like we were talking about AV1 development, which would be, you know, maybe having some community involvement. So I haven't like had a sense that there is a lack of funding, but more or less a lack of maybe engagement with the grants process.
I mean,
I thought.
the orchestrator community seems pretty switched on. I mean, they keep coming to these weekly water cooler chats, which is very flattering, and they keep producing upgrades, and they keep sharing with each other how to optimize nodes when you're not necessarily. I mean, you're competing with each other, but here we are supplying better supply every week. So I think the incentives are quite good the way they are. Now, I think it just really comes down to we wish we could, you know, supply more demand that comes in and engage with them somehow. But, you know, I don't know how that would
Doug,
look.
let me take a stab at least a comment around what you're hinting towards. And I think, like, I don't think funding's like the availability. If someone said, hey, there's a check out here right now to upgrade Livepeer to FFmpeg 6, like, I don't think anyone's looking for that. Like, I think the problem is there are people like myself and, you know, Fort Koonsman, I know John, all Elite also, where we're willing to work on these things, right? We're going to do these things. And it's maybe not like dollars per hours that we're concerned with. It's more or less like a collective vision and a path towards it, like a roadmap in which key features are exciting to the orchestrators, and that the orchestrators can participate at their own time and their own leisure to do these things and advance it. But like there's some like overarching thing moving it forward, right? And sometimes it may need money to kickstart it, or sometimes it might just need some people showing up at a water cooler to get people excited about it, like, or, you know, things along those lines. But I know FFmpeg is one that folks have looked at and said, man, we really got to get this latest codecs, these AV1 support, like, you know, and folks are looking at ways to do that. And when they look at it from a Go Livepeer and all the C code that's been forked and changed, it's like, oh man, like Mike Zuper can't do this or John can't do this. But like, as an overarching roadmap with several folks contributing and jumping in at whenever they have time to do so, I think that becomes more compelling for individuals to say, hey, I'm going to jump onto that roadmap and see if I can contribute there. Maybe I can't do the whole thing, but I can fix this method here or write a test case or whatever it may be.
Yeah, right on. I would totally agree with that. I mean, it's more of a matter of organizing around, let's say, a proposal to do AV1, for example. Getting all the right people together to work on that together. And if there's funding behind it, that's a plus.
Mike, do you mean a roadmap for the supply side of the network, like like an orchestrator focused roadmap, or did you mean like the network generally?
Well, I'm just saying in general, if you want to take an initiative that you want to see it and build towards it, knowing that it's going to be broader than an individual, right? It may be a collective group of people having to put some effort forward to get there. And again, I find it to be true on the demand side as well as on the, like, just some of the technical orchestrator operational stuff. But like, you know, it could be a marketing effort. Somebody just throw up a site and, you know, get some people on Product Hunt trying to use an orc, and maybe we subsidize free streams for a period of time of some sort and see if we can get somebody to like go viral with it. Like, I mean, it could be as simple as that. But I use the AV1 as something that I know a lot of orcs have been saying, hey man, when are we gonna get this latest thing in here? When are we gonna get this thing in here? Like, oh, it'd be great if we can run these GPUs, and like if we could run, you know, more than NVIDIA GPU. Like there's a whole thing like that where I hear folks in the community crying for those things, but there's no path there today, or it's not clear, or it's beyond an individual.
Right.
Yeah, I think like if Orchestrator DAO came together and made a proposal for X funding and said we're gonna use this in order to you know, harness a collective group to move forward towards getting AV1 into Livepeer, and that successfully occurred, that would be like such an awesome and powerful outcome of this. And like you said, sometimes it's like just the decentralized governance process, the pool of capital that's available, that like enables people to come together to coordinate to do that. I don't know what's blocked it so far, but I've seen that be you know, powerful in these other kind of Web3 governance examples as well.
Well, look, Doug, here's a perfect example. Video miner pool, right? Like 8 orchestrators committed to come together. No one got paid. Like, in fact, we spent money and time to get that built, right? Like for nothing. Like, no, there's no one sitting there cutting us a check or anything along those lines. Just that we truly believe that if we got a public pool and we can get people on board, that we're going to help the network, right? And again, it's probably step one of many steps for the group, the 8 that we work together on. But it's one of those things where if you they just need some tribe, some way to connect, and some direction. Get these motivated people pointed in the right direction, and let's not all waste our times duplicating effort. Let's find a way to get a collective vision on paper and start using that to guide and introduce these new members to the community to keep helping.
Yep. Yeah, couldn't agree more. And like that's where the retroactive element I think is so powerful, because like you said, you didn't do it in a mercenary way for money up front because you wanted to use that money just to build that thing and then move on and disappear. Like you did for all the reasons you just articulated, and now it's there and it's powerful, and maybe there's more you want to do. You want to bring more people in the community, or you actually do need to pay for X, Y, or Z. And that's where like the retroactive funding type mechanism from the Treasury could make that entity even more willing to spend time or to expand or to whatever or just feel more tightly connected to the project and its future and whatnot. So I think it's really powerful.
Yeah, it feels like a bug bounty program almost, but like a feature bounty. When you do retroactive rewards, and maybe there is a role in these as working groups for someone who's sort of like a lead, who's like a dare I say Scrum Master or something like that, but someone who is kind of organizing the development and making sure the efforts are coordinated. It's probably a common issue with decentralized protocols, but
it's like Titan does for the water cooler, but it needs to be somebody that's personally aligned to a strategic vision that they can see through.
Yeah, there's always strong leadership in these groups. Like they don't exist if there's no leadership. It doesn't mean it's only one person, but everyone can't just like diffuse responsibility.
Yeah, that's right.
Where would be a good place to start like putting these ideas down for like the wish list, like the orchestrator wish list? Because, just from the grants committee perspective, I think we're always impressed by the thoughtfulness of the proposals that come from the orchestrator community. And yeah, you guys seem to know, but I think it would be great like to also like have a list of, what you'd like to have other people work on. So where can we put that repo? Is it maybe Doug, it's awesome Livepeer? Maybe it's a thread on, maybe we create a wish list section there. I think it'd be good
My
to have.
instinct is like that like request for proposals sort of list should just keep a tab of the ideas that keep popping up, and there seems to be repeated interest in or that are louder than others.
Do we have an RFP tab in the forum? Is that what you meant in the forum?
No, I thought that Grants was working on one, maybe for the I forget if it was part of the upcoming accelerator cohort or the grants program, where we're just going to be like more specific about the types of applications on the demand side, at least, that
Well, I think that's what I mean for the network orchestrator side. I think like we're actually missing someone who owns the RFP list for the orchestrator side.
Got it. Okay, good flag. We could take a look at the Canny board or other options, but yeah, totally up for any ideas from this group as well.
Because I think, Mike, to your point, like it does, like, if Orchestrator DAO is going to exist and if there's going to be any funding behind it, whether that's, the grants committee as it exists today or the retroactive, you need that list of like, what are the aspirational goals that need contributions toward them.
Yeah.
Yeah, within the orchestrator DAO, would there be its own voting mechanism? Like, let's say there's a proposal to work on a project within that. Would that exercise LIP, or is it be a different voting mechanism there? I'm not so familiar with the DAO structure, but it sounds like that's what we would be going for. So that list might be, organized through voting.
Yeah, it would have its own voting mechanism. Ideally, it depends on the size and what it's trying to do, but ideally it's its own on-chain mechanism. I recommended, I threw out the governor framework using Tally. It's like if all the active O's have one badge and that's one vote in that, and proposals need whatever it is, 30% quorum with majority to pass or something, then that's the rules, and that's how when that DAO makes a proposal to the treasury, everyone would know that if you vote yes, LPT gets transferred into that new DAO, and like the rules are already observable on chain.
Does the tier 1 vote happen, like if you had a tier 1 vote pass, would it be on chain mechanics that would pay out, the address that won the vote, or is it acting as a
Yes.
DAO in itself, and then just someone has keys and they're handing it out?
Ideally, it would just automatically transfer the value. So you remove anyone from any central controller ability. It's fully community owned treasury, according to the rules in the protocol. There's work to do to get there. Like you have to build that, but that's how it would work ideally.
Right, but then you'd be subject to, what is it called, a Sybil attack, where it's 51%. If somebody has 51% control of the network, they could just fund themselves, or
That's right. Yeah. The 51% attack. You'd be subject to that.
Hey, Sean,
Which, by the
just
way,
so
like
you
the protocol
go
is
ahead.
the protocol is subject to that today, right? Like, well, you're right. The security committee is actually like the fallback. So there is a fallback at the moment.
Hey, Sean, I was just, someone posted they were listening to the chat and they sent me a private DM and they said, I don't want a wish list, I want an action list. So just so you know, we don't want to wish about it. We want things that we can actually take away and build on. You know what I mean? Like that, we were talking about a wish list. So we definitely want an action list, not a wish list.
Yeah, totally. A wish of actions. What actions do you wish would be taken?
There you go.
All right. Yeah, so we've been at this for 2 hours. I think we're going to end it here. Is there any last comments, questions, concerns to leave us with this meeting?
I just wanted to say thank you to Doug and Shan. Really appreciate you guys coming on. And I think this call was probably one of the better ones we've had. There was so much transparency and insight into what the plans are. So thank you.
Oh man, no, thanks to you all. This is the most active kind of aligned stakeholder group in the project and everything. So this needs to serve your vision for what you want it to be. So yeah, don't be shy. Jump in on the forum, add comments in Discord. I'm gonna make myself available for a couple other just open office hours discussions so others can get their questions answered around this and we can move towards a proposal.
Likewise, really appreciate everyone in the orchestrator community and on this call. And yeah, if anyone wants to follow up on grants and the future role for grants in Doug's vision, happy to chat about that. And really appreciated the thoughts on the delegator community, and stay tuned for more on that topic also.
Very cool. As always, I'm quite flattered that people come here every Monday and hang out with us for two hours. So originally this was a 1 hour meeting, and soon after it launched, it became natural to go to 2 hours. So thank you all for being here. I do appreciate your time, effort, and input. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Thal, and thank you everyone for coming. Yeah, we will do this next week. So please post on the forums, contribute where you can, and we will continue building and moving forward. So thank you all for being here, and we will see you all next week. Cheers.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks
Thank
all.
you, everyone.
Have a good one.
Thanks
I know.
all.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.